All right, college football for the next week. All right, so we got some games on Friday, the 13th. Clemson, Syracuse. I don't know if Kelly Bryant is going to play. He was in a boot last week after the game against Wake Forest. I got this game on upset alert because I like Eric Dungy. I like the receivers at Syracuse. I know I say that every week, but I do like the team that I see at Syracuse. Now, Clemson is projected to win by 22. I'm sure Clemson's defense will handle Syracuse, but I'm just saying Clemson on the road in a game where they're not really projected or suspected to lose. Possibly no Kelly Bryant. Watch this game. Let's make sure Clemson wins this game. I'm still gonna pick Clemson, but yeah, I do see where and I see both sides. I see, okay, yeah, Clemson's defense should handle Syracuse, but at the same time, I could see Dungy having a big game and keeping it close. And if Clemson can't get their offense going, it's going to be tough. Washington State, Cal's finally kind of playing some Big 12, Pac-12 teams now, so they're kind of falling back to the pack. They got slaughtered by Washington. We're kind of getting a better look at them. Washington State did beat Oregon on the road. A lot of people that are hung on Washington State, they're going to say, oh, they beat Oregon on the road, this, that. Oregon didn't have their starting quarterback. Oregon didn't look good. Really just couldn't get any offense going. Washington State will probably win this game again on the road. So 2 road games for them, not too many tough road games to start. Looking good so far for Washington State. We've got South Carolina, Tennessee. Tennessee is at home. I'm taking South Carolina on the road. I've been impressed with South Carolina this year. I took them last week against Arkansas. I'm going to take them again this week. Tennessee's projected to win 2.5 right now. I'll take South Carolina for sure on that. Then you got Texas Tech, West Virginia. I do not know how Tech is in the top 25 right now. To me, they hadn't beat. I think their best win is. I want to say their best win is Houston. Arizona State, Houston. To me, this is not deserving of a top 25 team. I'm sorry, Texas Tech people, but I think West Virginia is going to beat them at home. West Virginia is projected by 3.5 at home. I think you can bet on that. I think West Virginia will win. I've really been impressed with Will Grier. David Seals has had a really good year. He's got 9 or 10 TDs already for them, and they got a pretty good running game. I like West Virginia to win this game at home. But yeah, if Texas Tech wins it, it's going to propel them, keep their top 25 position. But I don't think they're going to win it. Okay, TCU, Kansas State. I'm going Kansas State in this one. Might sound like a little surprise. I like Kansas State. I usually pick. I feel like I pick Kansas State in more games than not this year. But I'm taking Kansas State in this game. I think that they can definitely upset TCU. I think TCU, they kind of been cruising. They felt like their test last week against West Virginia was a big test. I feel like this test against Kansas State is going to be a harder, tougher one. Kansas State is going to run the ball a lot. It's going to really factor if their offense can get going. But I do think Kansas State's defense does play good against TCU's offense. I think Kansas State can definitely pull an upset here. Early start, 11 o'clock. We'll see what happens. Michigan, Indiana. I'll take Michigan to win. Probably be a pretty close game. Michigan doesn't really ever blow out anybody, but I see them bouncing back against Indiana. Florida State, Duke. I'll take Florida State. I think Duke will give them trouble, but I'll take Florida State. NC State, Pitt. I'll take NC State. This is, as we're getting into the trust in NC State process, this could be a trap game where they lose. But I'm going to go ahead and take NC State still. Louisville, Boston College. I'll take Louisville. No brainer. Auburn, LSU. Auburn's 4-2. Their losses or LSU is 4-2. Their losses to Mississippi State, and who was their other loss? Oh, Troy. And Auburn's losses to Clemson. I'm taking Auburn on the road. It's a 6.5. I think they can do it. I think 6.5 is good. I think they can do that. I'll take Auburn. Even with the like even with the points. I think Auburn's going to really shut down LSU's offense. And then I think Auburn will be able to do just enough to kind of get going. Vanderbilt, Ole Miss is a tough game to pick. I'll take Ole Miss though at home. Vanderbilt hadn't been impressive since they got into SEC play, and I'll take Ole Miss. It'll be a close, good game though. Definitely could go either way. Baylor, Oklahoma State. I'll take Oklahoma State. Baylor's looked better each and every week, but I'll take Oklahoma State. Oklahoma, Texas. This is probably maybe because I'm a Big 12 boy, but this is probably game of the week. This is not a huge matchup-wise game. Like games this week, like Utah, USC is a good matchup. Oklahoma, Texas. There's a couple other good ones, but with like rivalry and stuff, Oklahoma, Texas at 2:30, as it always is. I think it's going to be a pretty good game. I think Texas's defense is going to play pretty well, and I think Oklahoma's defense is not going to play too well. So that bodes for a close game, a pretty good game. But I'm going to take Oklahoma to bounce back. After these big teams, this is what happens. They lose one game that they're not supposed to lose, and then they go on the rest of the season just slaughtering everybody. I don't know if they slaughter Texas because of how good Texas' defense is, but I think Oklahoma definitely wins the game this week. And Northwestern, Maryland, this is another kind of tough kind of pick 'em game. Those 2-3, 3-2 teams. And I'm going to take Northwestern. Northwestern's played Wisconsin and Penn State the last 2 weeks, so some tough games. I think they're going to really let it loose on Maryland. Maryland's coming off a loss against Ohio State. We'll see how that goes. Purdue, Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin definitely wins this game, but I want to say I think Purdue will give them hell. I think Purdue playing pretty well. And you know how the Big Ten is. Nobody really blows out anybody. Definitely not in the first half. It's real close. So I'll take Wisconsin to beat Purdue. Virginia, North Carolina, I'll take Virginia. Virginia's kind of been a surprise. Bronco Mendenhall is on the reins, and they're 4-1. They're looking to be 5-1. This could be a trap game though for them against North Carolina. North Carolina is 1-5, but North Carolina has had a pretty tough schedule this year. So this potentially could be a closer game. Virginia has not really had a tough schedule, so this game will be closer than you think it is. Don't let the records throw you off, but I'll take Virginia. And then as I go down my list, Georgia Tech, Miami. This is a real good game. I like this one. I think Georgia Tech can upset Miami this week. Walton's had some issues with injury, and so their running game's a little bit suspect. Braxton Berrios, the wide receiver, Amon Richards, they're pretty good, but they can only do so much. Miami's got a good defense, but do they know how to stop the option? In a time period where they would usually have had a bye, they usually would have had a bye last week, and a lot of time to prepare for Georgia Tech. But since the hurricane happened, where their game against Florida State got rescheduled for later, they don't have that 2-week time period to prepare for Georgia Tech in the option game. I think Georgia Tech gets the win in a close game. Navy, Memphis. This is a game I'm real excited about. A game that, like, when you look at the AAC at the first of the year, it's a game that you put a star by or whatever because it's going to be a big game, a good game. Memphis is projected to win 3.5. I'll take Navy on the road. I've been impressed with Navy. The option is hard to get ready for, and Memphis' defense has looked really suspect this year. It's going to be a shootout, but I think Navy can pull it out. Colorado, Oregon State. Colorado, had a tough game last week against Arizona that they lost, but they're playing Oregon State this week. I think Colorado can for sure win. Houston, Tulsa. I'll take Houston. Tulsa has had a real tough schedule, so don't be surprised by their record. They did just lose to Tulane, though. Tulane's not a good team, but they are 1-5. They're not looking very good. I think it's a game Houston definitely will win. Texas A&M, Florida. These are two similar teams, having issues at their quarterback position. Their starters aren't necessarily there anymore. The guys that they potentially would want to be there aren't there, so they're kind of going with some younger guys, more futuristic guys. Both have good-ass defenses, and they both have ran the ball pretty well the last couple weeks. I'm going to take Florida at home, bouncing back off after the loss. A&M's not going to be at home. They're going to have those obnoxious 12th man there. So I'll take Florida. And then Arkansas, Alabama, for sure. We're taking Alabama. Alabama's going to destroy Arkansas. Georgia, Missouri. Georgia's going to destroy Missouri. Nebraska, Ohio State. I think this game could potentially be closer. Nebraska honestly played Wisconsin pretty good last week. And Ohio State, Ohio State's, they kind of got some momentum after their win last week. They're feeling a little bit better about themselves after, their loss against Oklahoma. They're going to continue to slaughter teams until they get to the Penn State and Michigan game here in the Big Ten. So I think Nebraska will play them a little bit better than you think, but Ohio State is going to get the win. USF plays Cincinnati. It's not really a test, I'd say, but watch out. Cincinnati's a team that I thought could be better at the first of the year. They didn't play Michigan that bad, so watch that. Utah, USC. I'm taking USC in this game. Utah's good, but Utah's not that good on the road. And then last week they played Stanford at home and they got beat. Basically just beat. It was a good game, but they got beat. I think USC continues the stride that they're on. I think USC wins. Michigan State, Minnesota. I knew Michigan State was going to be ranked if they beat Michigan. It's so stupid, though. They're really not a ranked team. They got slaughtered by Notre Dame. They beat Iowa, who barely lost to Penn State. And, they did beat Michigan. But if anything, Michigan was using a backup quarterback. Michigan turned the ball over 5 times. Like Michigan State didn't beat Michigan. Michigan beat themselves. So, I understand, we're at a time period right now where that we got about a good top 20. Like we know who our top 20 are, but our top 25, those last 5 teams are kind of some teams that could be there, that couldn't be there. So I get it, but I'm not really happy with that. But I do think Michigan State will win this week against Minnesota. Hadn't been that impressed with Minnesota so far. I'm kind of over all the PJ Fleck bullshit that he does. UCLA and Arizona, I think Arizona will give them a little bit of trouble this week, definitely with how bad UCLA's defense has been this year. But I'm going to take Rosen to get it done. I'll take UCLA. Boise State, San Diego State, for sure San Diego State. I think Boise State will play pretty good, but I think San Diego State continues their undefeated season. Washington is going to slaughter Arizona State, I think, and then Oregon, Stanford. I think Stanford wins pretty handily. I think Bryce Love has another huge game, does what he does. I think Oregon's going to lose a couple games here in a row now with the fact that they lost their quarterback. Justin Herbert was a big part of their team. Broken collarbone, he's out. I don't think Oregon really has a shot at the Pac-12 now with the fact of that injury. And Stanford's going to continue to move their way up, and try to compete with Washington and Washington State for that title. They still have head-to-head games against both of them, so that'll be good for them. So let's talk about last week a little bit here. Some of the games from last week. Honestly, it was not that great of a college football week. It was one of those where I knew that there was going to be a couple upsets because there wasn't a lot of big matchups, and that always happens. When there's not a big matchup or a lot of big matchups, these teams that are supposed to win, they'll lose. They just fall asleep and they lose or whatever. But NC State, they handled Louisville. They looked good. They looked like the better team. Louisville doesn't really look like a ranked team that much anymore. It's Lamar Jackson and that's it. So, NC State definitely looked good and definitely won that game. Auburn slaughtered Ole Miss. Georgia slaughtered Vanderbilt. Iowa State, came out on top against Oklahoma. That was a tough game just because Oklahoma never was really losing in the game. They went down by 7 maybe, but then they tied it back up. And then at the end of the game when they went down by 7, they still had a chance to score, and they just didn't get it done. If there was another quarter in that game, they might have been able to, or, it was one of those things you kind of felt like, okay, it's 24-24 in the third, but, Oklahoma's going to score 2 or 3 touchdowns in the fourth, and it's going to be a 14-point game or whatever. It just never happened. Iowa State played really good. But I'm going to say one thing. This Joel Lanning shit is ridiculous. He had 20 tackles against Texas. Good shit. He made a couple big plays against Oklahoma. Good shit. He's atrocious on defense. I'm going to be the one to say it. You watch him, they gut Iowa State when he does stupid shit. I seen multiple times he run up in there and and just a linebacker's supposed to stay there and wait kind of like, avoid blockers, but wait for the ball to get to your level. Wait for the back to get to your level. You don't go into the line to try to get to his level, because then you just get into the pile, and he's great at that. He loves to run up there, get in the pile, and then boom, there goes the running back right in where his spot was. So he's really not a good linebacker. These motherfuckers are like, oh, talk about him as an NFL prospect now at the linebacker position. No, he's fucking garbage. Okay, so let's go down our list. Penn State slaughtered Northwestern. Kelly Bryant got hurt against Wake Forest. That's the biggest storyline out of that game. They slaughtered Wake Forest, though. They're up to like 28-0. Wofford didn't play, though, for Wake Forest. Not that that fucking matters. Virginia got past Duke this week. And then, that was honestly a pretty good game. Virginia was able to come out on top. And then, we had Syracuse and Pitt. Syracuse was able just to come out barely on top of Pitt. Just some kind of like these little ACC games that are pretty close. Kind of the bottom of the ACC teams kind of having some good games, close games. LSU, Florida. This was kind of a boring game, I'll say. But LSU was able to get on top. And, Florida just the thing I will say about SEC sometimes that's kind of boring is like it's either like a big play or a 3-and-out. Like, that's just how their offenses work. It's like either they got a big play offensively or it's a 3-and-out. So, and that's like the whole fourth quarter, or Florida ties the game or gets the game back 17-16, misses that extra point or gets it blocked or whatever. And then they're just stagnant the whole fourth quarter. LSU's stagnant the whole fourth quarter. They just both run the ball, run the clock out, basically. TCU beat West Virginia, but West Virginia did give them hell like I said they would. I figured TCU would probably win the game, but I thought that West Virginia would give them hell on the road. Kenny Hill was impressive. He played pretty good. He had a good late touchdown. But I don't see TCU being a playoff team. Notre Dame slaughtered North Carolina. Purdue was only up by 7 against Minnesota. They were trailing at the first of this game too, but then they got a pick six late that made the score 31-17, so it looks a little bit not as close as it was, but it was a pretty close game. Navy Air Force, it was a really good game, maybe game of the week. Well, I can't say game of the week because Miami Florida State was really good too, but Navy went up by a good amount in this game, and then Air Force just battled back. Then Air Force took the lead real late, and then Navy was able to score a touchdown with like 15-20 seconds to go, win the game. So Navy's 5-0 now. Air Force is like 1-4. Miami, Florida State. This was a really good game too. Braxton Berrios had a damn good game. He was a lot of the offense for Miami. And it was a big game for Miami to win. No Mark Walton for a majority of the game. He was injured. And then, Malik Rozier played pretty good. He was impressive. It was a growing game for them. They hadn't beat Michigan. They hadn't beat Florida State in like 7 years, I think, or the last 7 meetings. And so it was a game that, even Florida State's kind of like not the team that they were. They were in this game the entire time. And then, at the end, Miami was just able to score a touchdown instead of that field goal. Like, this game could have potentially gone to overtime 2020. So tough loss for Florida State, but it was a good game, good win for Miami. Miami's 4-0 or 5-0, whatever they are. South Carolina killed Arkansas. It was a pretty good game, like 10-17 until the third quarter when South Carolina scored like 3 defensive touchdowns. USC slaughtered Oregon State. Ohio State slaughtered Maryland. Texas and Kansas State played a real good game. It was a double OT game. I'm so glad that they're going with Sam Ehlinger. He's so much better than Shane Boucher. And he just fits the offense a lot better. I'll say one thing about Todd Herman, though, man. Will you use your running backs? You got some of the biggest running backs in Chris Warren and Kyle Porter in the state of damn Texas, and you ran Ehlinger 20 times. So they need to run the ball a little bit more. I like Ehlinger, but, come on, use the other guys. Kansas State couldn't run the ball at all. They had a really tough trouble running the ball. Texas defense is really good. They honestly beat them in the first half pretty well. And so then in the second half, Ertz got hurt, the quarterback for Kansas State, and this Delton guy comes in, and this dude was killing it. He ran it 12 times, 79 yards, backup quarterback. He did really good. He was the leading rusher of the game. But anyways, tough loss for Kansas State. They got backed up in the second overtime, and then they kicked the field goal, like a 50-yarder that they didn't make, and then Texas was able to score. So tough pill to swallow. but a very good game. Two middle of the road, pretty good teams. Houston was able to beat SMU. I'm pretty impressed with SMU so far this year. Only losses are to Houston and TCU. I think I'm ready for Houston and SMU to come to the Big 12. I think it's time. I think that SMU's recovered from the scandals in the 80s. Now they're kind of getting back to the forefront. And Houston has definitely been one of those teams the last couple of years. I think they need to add them to the Big 12, get the Big 12. And the thing is think about it. TCU was one of these teams, one of these Houston, one of these SMUs, 5-6 years ago. And now our perception of TCU is they're one of the teams. So I don't understand why we can't add Houston, why we can't add SMU and make them one of the teams. Alabama honestly played a pretty close game against A&M. Like, they got out to a big lead, 24-3 or whatever, but A&M was able to come back in the second half. Not that it was ever going to matter or whatever. But and then Kentucky played a shootout with Missouri. It was a shootout, real good game. Kentucky was able to come out on top. Virginia Tech beat Boston College pretty handily. Like I said, Washington State beat Oregon. Wisconsin and Nebraska, this was a pretty good game. Second quarter, it was exciting. Got pretty exciting in the second quarter, and then it was like 17-17 after a pick six in the third quarter that Hornibrook threw. But the main storyline in this game was Jonathan Taylor, dude rushed for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a freshman. He looks like an NFL back. Like he looks NFL ready as a freshman. Like it's kind of scary how good he looks. And what I will say about Wisconsin is Wisconsin produces some of the best backs, but it's because of their offensive line. This guy looks a little bit different though. With the amount of yards that he's rushed for in the first 4 weeks and stuff. And the fact is it's in the past it's been like they had like Monty Ball and then they had like James White. Like I don't remember how it went down. Melvin Gordon. They had a bunch of different guys. But anyways, like each year, Corey Clements, like one of them kind of takes off. Like one of them is the guy, and then like there's the backup, and then like it just kind of like the next year that guy becomes the guy, and then there's a new backup. The one thing that I'll say different about this year is like usually every Wisconsin running back is successful. Well, he's really been the only successful one. Shaw's had issues. They had another guy, I think that was the starter at the first year, but this guy, Taylor guy, definitely looks like he's the guy for Wisconsin. I think he definitely, at the first of the year when you're wondering what is going to put Wisconsin into the playoff, they found their answer. This is the guy. Their defense is lethal with Jim Leonhard as their defensive coordinator. Wisconsin's a team to watch out for going into later in the year, and the fact that their schedule is absolutely easy. Their toughest game is against Michigan. Until the Big Ten, whoever they play in the Big Ten championship game, which will be Penn State or Ohio State. Central Florida, they got into my power poll this week. They slaughtered Cincinnati. They beat Memphis last week. I'm really liking the UCF. They're looking good. I'm waiting for this potential UCF-USF matchup that's going to happen a little bit in a couple weeks. I'm excited about that. Stanford, Utah, I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Stanford just really the thing that was surprised about this game is where Stanford struggled as their quarterbacks, and their quarterbacks actually played all right. Utah didn't have their starting quarterback, so they went with Troy Williams, which was the starter last year. He didn't play potentially bad, but it was your typical Utah game where we run the ball on the first 2 downs, and we throw it on third, and we're 3 and out. And, it was one of those two where you're not losing by enough points to start going for it or start to be stressed out, but you're losing the entire time. And then, boom, Bryce Love breaks a big run, and they're up by 10, and it's over. So that's what happened in that game. Utah did score again later in the game, but it was just too late. They scored with like less than a minute. So Stanford wins the game. Washington kills Cal. San Diego State kills UNLV. Rashard Penny looks good. A good game from this week that I didn't really expect a good game. Arizona, Colorado. This Tate kid for Arizona, he comes in. Dawkins gets hurt. He rushes for 327 yards. He had an awesome game, 4 touchdowns. He only had 14 carries on the 327 yards. Philip Lindsay had 41 carries, 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. This man is awesome. I love Philip Lindsay. I got him on my list. Even though he's like 5'6", I have him on my list as my prospects. I really like him at the next level. I really hope a team gives him a chance. Sucks that Colorado lost this game. They really needed a win after they lost to UCLA last week. I think they've started 0-3 in the Pac-12 so far this year. Big win, though, for Arizona. And then my game of the week, or I guess primetime game of the week, we talked Michigan State, Michigan. This was a really fun game just because of all the storylines. It's a classic. We're going to go back and watch this one many times in the future. This one may now, as far as action and long and like scoring and excitement, this might not have been the best game, but just like storyline and everything about it. Michigan backup quarterback. Michigan State, they're not as good as they've been. They're a shell of what they were, but they've won 7 of 9 against Michigan. The last time they played at the Big House, we had this crazy punt block by Michigan State that made them win the game. And it was a game where Michigan State didn't need the game as much. They weren't really playing for the playoff. Michigan was undefeated. They were ranked 12th. They started off the year unranked. It was Harbaugh's first or second year, and they were just coming up, and then they lose that game to come onto this game where the tide has completely turned. Michigan is one of the top teams in the country. Their defense is so stout. Michigan State scores 14 in the first half. Cornstalk picks everywhere, and we're just watching this radar the entire game as it gets closer and closer to Ann Arbor, and I'm just sitting there hoping, please, when the fourth quarter starts, all this rain needs to just hit this. And it did. It hit us. It hit it, and, more picks happened, more turnovers. Michigan had the ball. Like I said earlier, Michigan killed themselves. Michigan had the ball, or they turned the ball over 5 times to Michigan State 0. Michigan State didn't necessarily beat Michigan, but Michigan beat themselves. O'Korn is terrible. I don't like him as a quarterback. He's probably going to be the starter for the rest of the year, though, because I think Speet's out with some vertebrae fractures. So Michigan is going to struggle unless their defense really pulls some stuff together for them. And I really like Joe Baki from Michigan State, a linebacker. This kid's a stud. You need to really start paying attention to him. Prospect-wise, I like him a lot. He had some big plays in this game. But as far as let's not get too excited. One thing I want to say, let's not get too excited about Michigan State. Yeah, they are 4-1. Their only loss is Notre Dame. They did get slaughtered by Notre Dame, though. And the other thing I will say, they beat Iowa, I know, but they played Iowa at home, and Iowa was 0-2 in the Big Ten at the time, playing Penn State and Michigan State. And to me, Michigan State they've got a really good defense like they always do, but their offense is just so suspect. Like, their quarterback's all right. He's not as experienced as I would like him to be. Their running game is kind of suspect. They don't really run the ball that well. And then, receiving-wise, they've never been really like a throwing team since they lost Connor Cook. So it's tough for me to really see Michigan State being successful or whatever, but I will say I think Michigan does have they need to wake up. They got Penn State coming in next week, and I don't know if they're going to be ready for that at all. As far as last week, they are not. O'Korn is not ready for Penn State. That's one thing I will say.